silence.
गुड मॉर्निंग आणि नमस्कार. मुंबई विद्यापीठाच्या वतीनं तुमच्या सगळ्यांचं आजच्या या 2 दिवसाच्या कॉन्फरन्सच्या दुसऱ्या दिवशी मनापासून स्वागत करताना मला डॉक्टर नितीन आरेकर याला आनंद होतो आहे. प्रोफेसर बाळ आपटे सेंटर फॉर स्टडीज इन स्टुडंट्स अँड youth movements. We are organizing a 2-day national conference on the role and contribution of students and youth movements in nation building during the pre and post-independence era. This is the second day. Let me introduce something about late Professor Bal Apte. Yesterday we celebrated his birth anniversary. Late Professor Bal Apte was a visionary social organizer and alma mater of University of Mumbai. He could rightly be described as a pioneer in theorizing the larger role of students and youth in nation building. Much before the coming of age of the post-independent student activism, perhaps he was the first to envision more proactive participatory role for students and youth movements in national reconstruction. Students' power was largely a coinage mooted by him together with his associates. A well-known and designated senior advocate at the Mumbai High Court, Professor Bal Apte, in the later part of his life, was the member of parliament for 2 consecutive terms in the Rajya Sabha from 2000 to 2012. A confident and convinced about the strength of students and youth movements, he wanted them to serve as agents of change. Mahatma Gandhi used to say, if you want to change the world, be the change. And the leader is instrumental in changing. And we are searching the future leaders among the generation next. And for this particular thing, we assembled over here today. This is the first session of the second day of 2 days national conference on the role and contribution of students and youth movements in nation building during pre and post independence era. We have panel discussion on the topic journey of student movements. Dr. Jain Kulkarni will be chairing this panel discussion. Dr. Bhushan Bhave, the executive member of Sahitya Academy and principal Vidya Prabodhini College of Commerce Education, Computer and Management, Parvari, Goa. Dr. Balaraju, Associate Professor, Department of Social Work, Mahatma Gandhi International Hindi University. Mr. Ahmad Sheikh, journalist and author, Maharashtra. Mr. Devendra Pai, journalist and author, Maharashtra. And Mr. Prafulla Ketkar, the editor of Organizer Weekly. They are going to participate in the panel discussion. Before we initiate the panel discussion, let me have the privilege to introduce all our guests today. I begin with the chairperson of this particular session, Dr. Jain Kulkarni. He is PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru Technical University and MPhil from Pune, MSc from Pune University, BSc from Pune University, now Savitribai Phule Pune University. He's a passionate teacher and an excellent motivator. He completed his master's and in physics from Pune University, as I pointed out earlier. He is associated with VBIT from last 13 years as professor in physics and director, internal quality assurance cell. His deep understanding of teaching learning process enabled him to design and execute innovative student-centric education process rather than examination-oriented process in VBIT. And this one is an important aspect. Over the past few years, he played a key role in wholesome and excellent growth of the institute. Under the leadership of Dr. Kulkarni and in association with Vidyarthi Seva Samiti Hyderabad, a team of students and young teachers has been consistently organizing a state-level technical symposium, Srijan, from past 15 years. This platform brings together building engineers from various colleges and industrialists. This event provides a unique opportunity to students to exhibit their skills and talent and nurtures their entrepreneurship skills. Dr. Kulkarni has taken up and overseen a number of excellent initiatives at VBIT, such as establishment of an R&D center, the Student Activity Center containing 22 activity forums. He has provided constant encouragement to students toward improvement in technical skills through professional societies like IEEE and IETE. As a chief coordinator of accreditation process, he led the team of about 200 teachers and enabled the institute to get accreditation from National Board of Accreditation, NBA, and National Assessment and Accreditation Council. He has keen interest in literature and in cultural activities. It is another facet of Dr. Jain Kulkarni's personality. He is an orator par excellence and a powerful communicator. A science-based TV serial, Vigyan Vishwa, World of Science, scripted by him, was telecast by a leading regional television channel and was well appreciated by students and youth. He writes in newspapers and magazines. To promote a scientific temperament in society, he delivers many lectures. Dr. Jain Kulkarni, we welcome you for this panel discussion. Now I'll be introducing Dr. Bhushan. Literally a literature person. He is the executive dean College of Commerce, Computer and Management. He has experience of teaching Konkani since 1991, and so many publications are in his name. Like in Sod Nibandh, he is a co-writer of it. Sahitya Navneet, it is also in Konkani. Sahi is a co-editor of the book. Karbari Konkani, Matoli, Goyatla Paramparik Kher, कोंकणी भाषा प्रकृति आणि परंपरा, साहित्य विमर्श. These are few of his books, and he edited some books in Konkani. Konkani, the title is Konkani, and he was the executive editor of the annual magazine Konkani Bhasha Mandal Madgaon. Ghumad Ghaz, he is the executive editor, and he was the Atithi Sampadak of Marathi magazine Vivek on the special issue on Goa. His contribution of Konkani's to Hortius Indicus Malabaricus, please bear with my pronunciation. This is the book in his name, and he has so many translated books in his name, like Kamla, a great play written by late playwriter in Marathi Vijay Tendulkar, Margadarshi Vyaktimatva, translation of the book Guiding Souls by Dr. Abdul Kalam, Kadha Saraswati and Nadi Saraswati. He had published articles on Konkani language, Goa issues in different journals, newspapers, books, etc. in Konkani and Marathi. He is the Foundation's Manipal Best Konkani Award by Weekly Chanakya, New Delhi. H.H. Parvadeshwar Mutt Karnataka Sahitya Puraskar in 2010 and Best Teachers Award by Konkani Bhasha Mandal Madgaon 2019. He held the position of Vice President, as a Vice President elected of Goa Konkani Academy. He was a member of Academic Council Goa University. He was the NSS program coordinator of the Goa University. He was the member Official Language Advisory Committee, Government of Goa. He was a member of Library Committee, Government of Goa, and so many committees. Sir, your expertise in this field will be very much useful for the people who are listening to the panel discussion. Now I'll take up the opportunity to introduce our next panelist, the Associate Professor from Mahatma Gandhi Fuji Guruji Center for Social Work, Mahatma Gandhi Antarrashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya Varda, Dr. K. Balaraju. He has his PhD in social work, rural community development and organizational effectiveness of NGOs. He has 15 years of teaching experience in social work education. He has published more than 20 research papers in national and international journals. He is nominated as member of the first court, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, by the Honorable President of India. He served as research assistant for University of Rikers, Japan, Government of Japan, and he served as consultant to various national, international level NGOs. And here I introduce writer from Maharashtra, Bhatti. Sir, he novel मला अतिशय आवडली होती. I read it. Thank you very much for this beautiful novel. He directed and wrote dramas Left, Right, Left, Jallianwala, The Symbol of Patriotism. He has 2 years experience as an assistant producer at ABP News, Mumbai office. He is an activity officer at State Marathi Development Institute, Marathi Language Department, Mumbai for 2 years. And he is associated with Z Media, that is Z24, Chovistas, Z News, Z Hindustan, as a reporter for the last 2 years. And the next panelist is Mr. And author. He started his career stint with independent MP Rajiv Chandrasekhar as a political analyst. Devendra assisted Chandrasekhar in legislative research, political communication, and worked on the Vision 2025 document. Later, Devendra Pai donned the role of social entrepreneur by starting a company called ASI Career Connect. In it, he evolved a business model based on career guidance. We saw him interact with nearly 1 lakh students across Maharashtra in the last 2 years. Devendra has co-authored a book on politics and governance in Tripura, a critic. For 3 years, Devendra taught social sciences to mass media students in colleges like Pralladari Lions Dalmia College, Siddharth College, and Devi Prasad Goenka College of Media Studies. He is on the academic advisory board of 2 courses affiliated to NL University and Mitibai University, respectively. He is also the co-founder of VESIM Lit Fest, organized by Vivekananda Education Society Institute of Management. At present, he is heading a postgraduate program in leadership, politics and governance as its course director at RMP, Rambhav Margi Prabodhinis, Indian Institute of Democratic Leadership, Mumbai. And lastly, I would like to introduce the last panelist, Dr. Mr. Prafulla. Editor of Organizer. He is having experience of more than 20 years in the fields of research, media, and academics. He is also advisory committee school of Journalism, Delhi University. He has been writing on issues related to international politics and foreign policy with special reference to China and Southeast Asia, trade and economy and non-military security issues. He was also a member of the editorial team of the recently published complete works of Pandit Deen Dayalji in 15 volumes. He is a member of the ZNU Code and National Book Promotion Council. Comparative political philosophy and comparative civilizations are his areas of interest, and he delivers lectures of Bharatiyata and Bharatiya civilization through various platforms. Recently, Shri Ketkar is also appointed as a member of Raja Ram Mohan Rai Library Foundation. He is also a member of the advisory committee Prasar Bharati for special programs commemorating 75 years of independence. Shri Ketkar has worked as a news reader and translator with News Service Division of AIR, All India Radio. He was also an assistant professor and head in a college affiliated to the University of Pune. He has a master's degree in political science from the University of Pune, an MPhil from ZNU, New Delhi, in international politics. He worked on many research projects. His association with the CSDS project Lokaniti on electoral behavior gave him deep insights on the strengths and weaknesses of Bharatiya democracy. He has worked at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, IPCS, New Delhi as a food scholar and co-authored a book titled Alternative Approaches to Society. He has 2 books and 29 academic articles, 2 entries in an Encyclopedia of India on India's foreign policy towards Europe, and brief biography of Lal Krishna Advani, and numerous research publications to his credit. He has been closely involved in the students' politics, especially from his JNU days in 1990s. So here are all our panelists, and I take this opportunity to hand over the charge to the chairman of the panel discussion on the topic Journey of Students Movement, to Dr. Jain Kulkarni sir. Sir, it's all yours now. Thank you, and it was my honor to introduce the entire panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Nitin, for the introduction of the entire panel. I welcome my dear panelists. I also welcome all the participants here, the delegates who are joining from various institutions to this 2-day national conference on the student and youth movement's contribution in pre and post-independent era. आप सभी को विद्यार्थी और छात्र आंदोलन के बारे में कल वेरियस प्लेनरी सेशन में विभिन्न पहलुओं पर हमने बातचीत की है. The main focus of today's discussion is multidimensional aspects of the student movement, how it originated, how it took a particular shape in the context of Indian socio-political scenario, how it developed itself during last 70 years, and what are the challenges it is facing today. छात्र आंदोलन के विभिन्न पहलू हैं जो आज हमारे चर्चा का फोकस है. वो इस पहलुओं के बारे में जानकारी लेना, to understand in detail about each aspects of this movement. इसका एक अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर है, इसका एक पहलू बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है जो भारत के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में उजागर होता है. It has its significant contribution in the regional level. इसकी एक व्याप्ति अपने महाविद्यालय और विश्वविद्यालय में है जहां से यह छात्र आंदोलन उभर के आता है. So at different levels it has different shape, one at world level, another at India level, third it at regional level, which is having significant contribution, and the fourth one at the birthplace of its, that is university and the colleges. It has played a different role in different places. छात्र आंदोलन छात्रों के कॉज के लिए होता है, छात्रों के समस्याओं के लिए होता है, उसके निराकरण के लिए होता है. छात्र आंदोलन राष्ट्रीय पहलू के लिए होता है, राष्ट्रीय समस्या के निराकरण समाधान के लिए होता है. छात्र आंदोलन सोशियो पॉलिटिकल इश्यूज के लिए भी होता है. छात्र आंदोलन की अपनी एक भूमिका हमेशा रही है. सो मैं मान्यवरों से अपील करता हूं कि ये सब विभिन्न पहलुओं पे हम बात करें. जो भी हमें जानकारी है जिसके बारे में हम कुछ कंट्रीब्यूट कर सकते हैं, definitely we have to add our point of opinion into this flow of discussion. शुरुआत में माननीय प्रफुल्ल जी से करता हूं. जागतिक स्तर पर जो छात्र संगठन उभर के सामने आया है उसके बारे में प्रफुल्ल जी का अपना एक अध्ययन है. सो ये छात्र संगठन और ये छात्र मूवमेंट, इसकी शुरुआत कहां से हुई? इन्होंने एक अच्छा शेप कहां से लिया, इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ इंटरनेशनल पॉलिटिक्स इसकी एक जगह क्या है, इसके बारे में सर आप थोड़ा अवगत कीजिए। प्रफुल्ल जी।
धन्यवाद, धन्यवाद सर। Respected Dr. Jain Kulkarni and my other co-panelists. First of all, my humble tributes to Professor Bal Apte, in whose memory this conference is being organized. And I would like to start by quoting him on what he termed as what is the importance of students' power and student politics in the global scenario. He says in one of his writings in 1971, and I quote, "Students' revolt or unrest or power or activism, whichever way one may choose to label it, is no more a phenomenon, but is an established fact, a reality." And in 1971, he writes, "The last decade witnessed various manifestations of this power, and the current one is likely to see a further variety of forms." This clearly suggests that in many ways, 1960s was a watershed in a way as far as student politics and student activism globally. But because this panel discussion is mainly in the context of India and in comparison to other student movement across the world, we clearly see that globally anti-colonialism was the biggest triggering point to attract students to activism. If we see in China, for example, what started on 4th of May 1919 was what they celebrate as the Chinese Students' Day or May Day. It was mainly was a protest against the Treaty of Versailles, and in the international context, it was a very important. Eventually, this movement, the May 4th tradition, is important because it actually gave a basis to the entire communist movement in China. But many times we forget that in Poland, in 1901-2, and from 1905-6 onwards, from Vangabhanga in Bharat, we already had the phenomena of student activism for the independence struggle. In fact, if I see globally what differentiates Indian freedom struggle is the students boycotting government schools and giving up their education and other opportunities for the national cause, and Swadeshi movement and Vangabhanga movement was a very important triggering point in that process. Because we are celebrating this 75 years of independence, and I'm coordinating many of the activities, being a member of the coordination committee for Prasar Bharati. One important fact that we miss out, that from 1906 to 1911, there were more than 436 secret societies that were functioning in India. Anushilan Samiti was, of course, the coordinating agency and mainly active in Bengal and Maharashtra, but all over India, and especially the central province and even the northern province, present-day Uttar Pradesh and present-day Madhya Pradesh, there was a very strong revolutionary activism that was there, and it was mainly among the youth and the students. And they played very crucial role in adding the revolutionary anti-colonial zeal to the entire movement. And uh, uh, the most historic event that we miss out. See, in 1905, what had happened, only Bengal was partitioned on religious lines. But it became a national movement. And not only it became a national movement, by 1911, भारत की जनता ने लोकमान्य तिलक जी के नेतृत्व में अंग्रेज सरकार को अपना केवल पार्टीशन वापस लेने के लिए नहीं बाध्य किया. बंगाल का पार्टीशन तो निरस्त हुआ ही, बट व्हाट हैपेंड with that is equally important. British government was forced to change the capital from Calcutta to Delhi. Now, this was a very significant movement. Unfortunately, we never understood and analyzed this from a student movement perspective. And that's why, this post-independent phenomena, on even in the global context, what is considered as the watershed in 1960s in the US university, the Berkeley movement, is perhaps nothing compared to that. Because in Indian context, this movement was consistent and not limited to the students' cause. What happened in Berkeley was initially mainly related to the students' rights and their facilities and their fees. So mainly related to then it switched over to Nixon administration, then anti-Cambodia, anti-war campaign sort of, and this was a change, or I would say ideological shift in a way in the student movement also. The so-called radical, and again, I would say, Balapteji had a very keen interest and kept a close eye on these developments across the world, where he says the use of the word student power. This word of the use, student power, started by the so-called radical movements. In 1950s, what had happened, please try and understand, that by then, thanks to the Second World War and the phenomena of Nazism, nationalism was already a bad word in Europe. And so any student organization talking itself for national cause or cause of nationalism was considered as a sort of stigma in a very negative light. And this was the same period where the so-called radical student movements started gearing up. This is the same time when the European communist movement was dying down, and all of them were relegated to the American universities, where they started one important initiative called cultural studies, gender studies, media studies, and the students coming out of it actually started this narrative of overthrowing the system. So what I would say is 1950s and 60s, we clearly see the first takeover of the student movement and this call of, so-called students of the world unite kind of thing, which miserably failed by 1970s. And what we see from 1970s onwards, especially 80s and 90s, is the typical national essence of though in India in late 1940s itself, we have seen the, Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad in some way coming out of a political, ideological baggage, and proudly talking about the national cause and nationalism. It gained, significance during the Navnirman movement in 1970s. So, and after that, if you see, again, the expansion of the cause from student movement to this taking up, for example, the Kashmir cause or the illegal migration issue, which is beyond the, the student interest, quote unquote, kind of issues. And therefore, uh, this was a second phase, I would say, especially for the post-independent era, if we want to categorize that way. But what has happened post 1990s is much more uh, fundamental, and I believe it requires a detailed kind of understanding and analysis. The process of globalization um, completely changed our socio-psychological understanding of various issues. The primacy of economic and technological consideration changed the society in many ways, and education sector and student life is not, immune to it. So what you suddenly find is on the one hand, we started gaining the global consciousness in terms of our economic and technological activities, but our movements, our issues started getting fragmented. So the it became very difficult. So you see, the New York University phenomena is different from the Berkeley University phenomena, or you see Banaras Hindu University phenomena is entirely different from Pondicherry University or JNU phenomena. So students coming on one platform for either their cause or national cause for one single issue became very, very difficult. And from 1996-98 onwards, you see what was earlier various forms of student movement, good or bad, I'm not passing the judgment, but whether anti-Hindi or anti-English or the Telangana types for separate state, they started losing steam. And if you see the current phenomena of student activism post 1990s, they became very much election oriented. The politicization and political parties controlling the election process and the student politics has become a very common phenomena all over the world. In that context, again, I would like to say that in India, the process has been much more vibrant, because, as I said, whether Navnirman Andolan or which was, and we see that even during the anti-corruption movement. But this one issue, you see the use of technology for student activism, the use of social media for student activism, students of one country standing up for the cause of student of other countries. Again, I'm not passing the judgment, good or bad, but that is happening. What is missing in that is the depth of the issue that we see in 1970s, 80s, and early 90s. The issues that were picked up were led by very serious leaders who were committed for certain cause. Now what we are seeing, what I generally like to call as the Kamal Kumar phenomenon, uh, being a JNU alumni, I have seen this process very closely, that you remain a committed communist in the campus, By the time you are out of the campus, you take all the capitalist help to sustain your personal life with a communist template, whether either in the form of NGO or in the form of media activism. So you defeat your own ideological spectrum that you stood for in your student life. That hypocrisy is a very problematic thing. And there I believe that the organizations that stood with some kind of nationalist cause, even interestingly, if you see from 2018 and 19, in the Chinese student movement, there is a growing sentiment of nationalism that is used instead of communism. Even the 4th May celebration, if you see last 2 years in China, are overarchingly talking about the hyper-nationalism. So there is a shift. There is what I would say a apparent paradox, that on the one hand there is a technological and at the level of consciousness, it's a globalized impact of one movement over another without understanding, supporting each other. So somebody will stand for the Berkeley or some movement started in American University for Black Lives Matter and support from here, and somebody from Berkeley will stand for the cause of Jamia University from the US, without understanding what has actually happened. So this kind of paradox, but at the same time, you will see a strong localized national sentiments coming up. Unfortunately, in this, the issues related to education that we have seen against privatization, against mm, uh, liberalizing investment in education system, then the issues related to the curriculum and the content, those issues seems to be taking a very low profile, and political issues, the state centric issues, uh, are taking prominence. Uh, I believe this is like a societal transformation. This is also a kind of phase, uh, transformative phase, even in the student movement. They will evolve themselves out of this paradox. But I think to understand the current phenomena globally, we need to understand that this is a hyper global versus hyper national paradox, ideological paradox, and therefore losing out on the core concerns of student community, educational concerns, and taking them out from the student movement. That has been happening globally. How we can change that course, and especially in the context of India, how we can bring back the the real national concerns, having strong mooring in the civilizational ethos, the educational system of India, and reforming it with continuity. That is, I think, is the real change, a real challenge for the entire student. I wouldn't say politics, I wouldn't say student power, but student activism for certain. This is a challenge. So this is my means opening remark, just giving a brief overview. Thank you again.
Thank you, Prabhulaji. You presented the details of student movement, particularly in India, various shades involved in that, in the proper context of the student movement across the globe, how it evolves and how the different shades are involved into that. Dr. Bhushan, would you like to add something into that in your remark?
Thank you, Dr. Jayant. In fact, I like the way Mr. Prafullaji has put forward all the things. As he has rightly said, student movement is a worldwide phenomenon. And it has taken care of all the things, all the spheres of life, including the government policies, with respect to education, especially university reforms, infrastructural facilities. It has covered all the aspects of not only education, but the human life. And as he has rightly said, Prafullaji has rightly said, that most of the student movements in the world are the nationalist movements. If we see at the cause of them, they might be a small problem in the university or small problem in the hostel, but the final culmination is always into a national issue. We see the movements right from the unification of German nation in the mid 19th century, 1871, till the Berlin Wall fall in 1989. We can see this entire 100 years of student movement in Germany as the most nationalist in nature. And there is no doubt in my mind about that. In fact, the basic idea of student participation in all these movements was empowering the students or participation of the students in the academic governance, which they insisted upon. And this was the main cause of most of the agitations that we see. And as Mr. Prafullaji has said, after 1960, we find the real crust of the student protest in the entire world. May it be Europe, may it be US, South America, or even our Asia also. And this has, done a lot of change in the society. It has brought down the governments of that period. It has changed the government policies altogether. It has influenced the political life of the country. And basically, in the Western countries, most of the agitations were for the civil rights, basically the civic rights for the black people. So it was against the discrimination on the basis of race. Most of the agitations have taken place. And I think Prafullaji forgot to tell us about the Tianman Square tragedy which took place in 1989. They have experienced this, that the students' demonstrations for the democratic rule were massacred by the then governments of China and Korea. We have seen this in both the countries. Thousands of students were killed, they were massacred by the army. In fact, in case of Korea also, when they wanted to unite North and South Korea, the people were killed, the students were killed during that agitation. Hundred and 60 number of students protest in only US. And I was finding the cause of them, the entire cause of them was against the social and economic inequality, against the racial discrimination, and there were protests to that size of it, to that number. As Prafullaji has rightly said, technology has not only helped, but it has boosted all the student movements across the world. And even today, dissemination of the information, awareness, creation of awareness among the student community, all this has been happened only because of the technological know-how. Coming to the pre-independence period, Jayant, if you permit me to say a few words about this also. If you go back to the history, the first student strike took place in 1920. It was in King Edward Medical College at Lahore. We see that was against the academic discrimination between the Indian and the European students. Then we go ahead in 1828, an academic association was formed in Bengal, Hindu College, under the guidance of Henry Louis Vivian Derozio, who was a teacher and reformer there in Bengal in 1828. His disciples formed the Young India group. See the name itself, how it has come back. And Young India group of free thinkers, and they played a part in the Bengal Renaissance in the 19th century, including the partition of Bengal, which Prafullaji has just now mentioned. Followed by these more debating societies which have come up across the educational institutions. We have seen in Maharashtra, Marathi Sahitya Association had come in Bombay College. Then the Gujarat Dramatic Group in Gujarat was also working for the same cause. So these are the histories of various student associations, organizations, their movements and their agitations throughout the country during that time. As Mr. Prafull has rightly said, 1905 was the culmination, or was rather the turning point of all the student agitations in India. As a fact that it was not only a Bengal partition for Indians, it was a partition of India. And in the same year, the students of Eden College in Kolkata burned down the then Viceroy Lord Curzon's effigy to protest against the partition. In 1903, again, there was an important event in the student movement of the entire country and maybe entire world also. Abhinav Bharat Society was formed. It was formed by Savarkar, none other than Savarkar and his brother Ganesh. This was the platform for students to raise their voice against the corrupt British government. Although it started in Pune, later on it was spread like wildfire in Bengal, in Punjab, in many states of the country. It was, of course, violent and aggressive in nature. And in Pune in 1904, we see, when we peep in the history, that there was a meeting which was attended by not less than 200 participants from throughout the country, representing various states. We know the historical facts, what has happened after that: attack on the Curzon Wiley, then attack on Jackson. And we may call this as the beginning of the student and youth movement in India, if not less than that. And then we come to during independence period. Let me highlight a few incidents which took place during the independence period, wherein students participated in large number. In fact, students individually and also under various banners, they had participated in the freedom struggle of the country. Just now we have mentioned about the partition of Bengal. In 1905, Swadeshi movement, in fact, which triggered off the Indian freedom struggle at one point of time. After the revolt of 1857, we can find such a movement getting its base throughout the country. And it was against the divide and rule policy of the then British government. Of course, we know a division between Hindu and Muslims. Then this Swadeshi movement was initiated by Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal and Lala Rajpat Rai. National education was the thrust area of this entire movement of Swadeshi. As we have seen, everywhere it has got some other angle. Like at some places it was a boycott of foreign goods, at some places it was some other thing. But the common factor of this movement was Swadeshi. The Swadeshi movement was the national education. And we know the contribution of Bipin Chandra Pal, Arvind Ghosh, who were all students of that age of youth during that period. In fact, we have seen the events like Rakhi Bandhan during partition of Bengal, or the establishment of the Federal Hall. These are some signs and symbols of the nationalist student movement which started after 1990 in India, with the intention of imbibing national ethos among the society, among the students. These were the main aspects of that: boycott of the foreign goods, and even that Bal Bharti Samiti by Rajamundry was another event of the student movement in India. Then we have non-cooperation movement, participation of students. We have Lahore Congress in 1929, which declared complete independence. Again, a huge participation by the student of that time, especially women participation, ladies participation of that after 1929. Then we have the leadership of Subhash Chandra Bose, wherein most of the youth participated, students participated. The assassination of Bhagat Singh, Sukhadev and Rajguru was also a culmination of the student movement at that time in the youthhood of these great martyrs of India. And in 1936, we had that All India Students Federation, which was formed by the Congress, the then Congress. And of course, the final movement was the Quit India movement, in which many youth, they had a mantra, do or die, and they participated largely in the, this freedom struggle. So these are the three phases at the world level, then pre-independence and during independence, that we can see the entire feeling of the student movement was a nationalist feeling. Dr. Jain?
Yes, I think that, that the evolution of the student movement post-independent era is totally the new phenomenon. It has taken a very wonderful shape at regional level, university level, again at national level, again for student cause and national cause, but that is altogether different topic for discussion, and we are going to come across that. Before going to Balraju, Devendra, that how this exactly, any other shade that you would like to analysis while when we can say that a student movement evolved in Indian context actually?
In the Indian context, as everyone pointed out before me, the speakers, Prafulji and the other speaker, that the first wave of student movement, when we say student movement, I would say in the modern context, because perhaps, as somebody mentioned yesterday, that Shivaji Maharaj should be credited to be the first youth student leader of India, जिन्होंने कुछ यंगस्टर्स को जमा किया और उन्होंने एक क्रांति छेड़ी स्वराज्य के लिए. So in the modern context, we can define the first wave as the wave of self-determination during the pre-independence era. We had the likes of Savarkar, Madanlal Dhingra, and others who were there at the India House, who studied advocacy, and then they took up revolutionary techniques. We had Bhagat Singh, Batukeshwar Dutt. We had young teachers like Surya Sen, with the help of Pritilata Wadekar, Kalpana Datta, जिन्होंने British armory को लूटा. They were sentenced, they were imprisoned, and there were a lot of atrocities which were committed against them. In the second phase, after the independence, perhaps, there was this phase of a social, cultural, political revolution in India. And perhaps one of the prime most examples of that would be the Dalit Panther movement. Being in Maharashtra, sitting in Mumbai, which was perhaps the nucleus of the Dalit Panther movement, it is very important to mention this movement that, till this point of time, how Dalit activism was, limited to, a plain writing or plain commentary. And then there was this radical shift, both in terms of literature, as well as, finally we had these youngsters in the college campuses, on the streets, in the universities. And one of the biggest examples and the leaders of this movement is Ramdas Athavale, who actually functioned from within the Mumbai University hostel. So this was an important phase, which was a turning point, because till this particular point of time, we can say that, the movement of students or youth were led by the privileged class. And perhaps this was the phase when the democratization of the student and youth movement in India actually happened. Now, this phase further extends, the Dalit Panther movement was happening, and suddenly Indira Gandhi, is heading towards dictatorship. And we have these, small movements which begin and, garner shape and speed. There was the Bihar Navnirman movement. There was the Gujarat Navnirman movement. It eventually culminated into the JP movement. And when finally Indira Gandhi actually declared emergency, it was the students which came to the forefront. And at this point of time, it was the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, which led the pro-democracy protests. Now, an important part of this particular phase, or, if you evaluate literally all the phases which you're talking about till now, is that all these phases gave us new and fresh kind of leaders. If the Dalit Panther movement gave us Ramdas Athavale, we had the anti-emergency, pro-democracy movement giving us leaders like Sushil Kumar Modi, Nitish Kumar, and so on. Now, this anti-emergency protest evolved or further extended into after a decade, that was the Anti-Mundal Protest. Now, when the Mandal Commission was declared and the report was made public, there was this Anti-Mundal Protest, and at the same time there was the Pro-Mandal Protest. So this becomes one more phase of the student movement, because till this point of time we are having the students getting together to fight against, say, XYZ rule or XYZ person, but it is the Anti-Mundal Protest which actually brings about a split in the student movement, wherein there is this group of youngsters, protesters, who say that Mandal Commission should not be implemented. We have the famous case of Rajiv Goswami's self-immolation, AIMS के बाहर, I think it was October 1990, कि उन्होंने आत्मदहन का प्रयत्न किया था, और उसके बाद there were a series of similar self-immolation protests. But this was countered by the pro-Mandal protests, again led by these people like Mulayam Singh Yadav, Lalu Prasad Yadav, who are also a product of the anti-emergency movement. Now, this was the phase of the 90s. It was till 90s that we saw all these things happening. Now, a major shift, if we can say, when we go towards the next phase, is the invention of technology, especially in our hands. We finally get the mobile phone, we finally get the internet, and this starts to have an impact on how the youth responds and reacts. The biggest example of that would be the India Against Corruption movement. Now, India Against Corruption was not at all a very organized movement. I was in Delhi at that time. I was working with Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who was then an independent MP. And I used to spend a good amount of time at Ramlila Maidan. I used to spend a good amount of time at Jantar Mantar to look at what's happening. It was basically, even in Delhi, it lacked the proper coordination it should have been. But because it was picked up by social media, because it was picked up by media, and the youth all over this country, they felt that humne isme kuch karna chahiye. So there were candlelight marches held all over India, whether it was Bombay, it was Calcutta, it was Bangalore. So we had this sporadic students who are not really organized. अपने अपने जगह पे सोशल मीडिया पे डिक्लेयर करते थे, यहाँ पे कैंडल लाइट प्रोटेस्ट होना है, यहाँ पे ऐसे प्रोटेस्ट करना, सभी लोग साथ में आ जाओ. So again, this was a very interesting thing that happened, and eventually ये मैं भी अन्ना की टोपी पहनते पहनते there was a birth of a political party. I think after the Assam movement and the Assam Ganatantra Parishad, perhaps we have to credit the birth of Aam Aadmi Party to the students and the youths. Though the movement was led by people who are not young, but the chunk of the people which got attracted towards the Aam Aadmi Party, even if you look at the office bearers right now, most of them would be under the age of 40. Now, the power which was created, that the students and the youth.
Even Devendra, Nirbhaya agitation is also
exactly. I was actually heading towards that. Now, the power which was created in this 2011 anti-corruption protest made the students realize that sadak pe aane se kuch hota hai. We are being heard. There is something that happens, and eventually that culminated into capturing of Raisina Hill in 2012 after the rape and murder of Nirbhaya in Delhi. And that was a huge scene. I mean, students everywhere. And I'm pretty sure at that point of time, because I have friends in Delhi who told me that across party lines, whether it was a communist or a nationalist, it was ABVP or NSUI or any other political or a student group, everyone came down on the Raisina Hill, demanding justice for Nirbhaya. So that is a very good example of the unity of the student movement for a certain cause. I will conclude my opening remarks with the sixth phase, which of student movements in India, which I address or call as the confused or the woke phase. Now here, in this phase, the students are totally divided. I mean, they have absolutely no idea over which direction they have to be headed. Of course, youth has a lot of energy with them. Youth has a lot of confidence with them, but then that is not channelized properly. Or nahi kiya to kya hota hai? I mean, there are students who, if at one point of time we had students in the JNU, criticizing Bharat Tere Tukde Honge kind of slogans, but then there were a bunch of students who said that they have the right to freedom of expression. We saw this during the CA protest. We saw the confusion which was created during the CA protest, especially bringing the NRC in. Same thing happened during the RA protest in Mumbai. Same thing happened during the farm laws. I mean, you go to the students, you ask them, you go to the youngsters who are protesting in favor of the farmers, protesting for the farm laws, you ask them, Kia farm laws kya hai? They have absolutely no idea. So the conviction in why they are protesting lacked here. I think one of the reasons for this, which has to be blamed, is that, in the fifth phase, we just had the social media or the internet, which was influencing the students. But now we are at the stage of the influencers who are influencing the students. The youngsters, the students get influenced by some television star on Instagram or Snapchat making a political statement without doing his or her own study. In spite of the available resources, the youngsters get influenced, and in common man language, they are termed as, woke students. Anyways, at this point of time, I will conclude my opening remarks, resting my case at the sixth phase of the student movement's evolution in India as the woke phase.
Good that you brought the discussion on a very important juncture, that truly, democratization of our student movement, and that a lot of opinions are getting evolved. And if the Delhi agitation or that anti-corruption agitation is a product of influence of social media, then the present state of confusion is also a byproduct of the influence of social media. And then student movement has to find out its own way across this one. Dr. Balraju, you have a fantastic background of social work, because you have done your master in social work, and you have seen across the country various social projects being run by student organization or NGOs, where that youth and students role is very important. मैं तो उस्मानिया यूनिवर्सिटी के बिल्कुल बाजू में कॉलोनी में रहता हूँ, and I have seen that continuous 8 years how the Usmania University students have given a wonderful shape to the separate statehood agitation, of which Dr. Balraju was also a part and parcel of that agitation. He was one of the leading figures. But constructive activity is also a very important role, where the student movement and the youth movement are being played in India. From a couple of years back, we have seen many such projects are the product of some student movement. Dr. Balraju, would you focus on this constructive the shape of the the student movement?
Yeah, सभी को नमस्कार, धन्यवाद जयंत जी. सभी पैनलिस्ट ने अभी तक जो उनका मत रखा, लगभग सभी स्वतंत्रता से पहले से लेकर अभी तक स्वातंत्रोत्तर जो हमने लास्ट 75 ईयर्स से हमने जो देखा, इसमें स्वतंत्रता से प्राप्ति से लेकर अभी जो स्टूडेंट मूवमेंट्स हुआ पूरा भारत में, अभी हम जो भारत को देख रहे हैं, समृद्ध सशक्त वैभवशाली भारत का निर्माण हमारा लक्ष्य है बोल के हम सब लोग बात करते हैं. इसमें कंस्ट्रक्टिव स्टूडेंट मूवमेंट का भूमिका बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल है. इसमें जनरली स्टूडेंट एजिटेशन नाम सुनने के बाद, इस शब्द को सुनने के बाद सभी को एक जनरल सोशल परसेप्शन ऐसा है, स्टूडेंट एजिटेशन मीन्स कुछ गड़बड़ हो रहा है, स्टूडेंट एजिटेशन मीन्स कुछ धरना हो रहा है, कुछ रास्ता रोको हो रहा है. जनरली वैसे ही एक परसेप्शन है सोसाइटी में. सो इसके साथ साथ भी जो स्वातंत्रानंतर हमारा देश में जो एजिटेशन, अभी स्वदेशी स्वतंत्रता से पहले से, अभी जैन जी ने मेंशन किया उस्मानिया यूनिवर्सिटी तेलंगाना मूवमेंट के बारे में. सो उस्मानिया यूनिवर्सिटी तेलंगाना सेपरेट स्टेट का मूवमेंट डिफरेंट आइडियोलॉजिकल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस इसको लीड किया. इसमें दो प्रकार का था, एक सेपरेट स्टेटहुड फॉर गुड गवर्नेंस, एक प्रकार का आइडियोलॉजी था, और हम थोड़ा प्रांतीयवाद को प्रोवोक करके कुछ डिफरेंसेस सोसाइटी में क्रिएट करना है, स्टूडेंट्स के बीच में कुछ डिफरेंट सोच पैदा करना है, ऐसा भी एक सोच का एक आंदोलन चला था। लेकिन फाइनली सेपरेट स्टेटहुड का जो आंदोलन चला था उसमें कंस्ट्रक्टिव मूवमेंट भी चला था। तेलंगाना एजिटेशन में जो आंदोलन हुआ, फायरिंग हुआ, बहुत विद्यार्थियों का बलिदान भी हुआ, उसी में सेम उस्मानिया यूनिवर्सिटी में एक दिन 1 लाख विद्यार्थी रक्तदान करना तेलंगाना के लिए, ऐसा भी एक कंस्ट्रक्टिव प्रोग्राम का भी एक हम लोग देख पाए। सो ये पूरा इसके ऊपर डिपेंड होता है स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का फिलॉसफी क्या है। स्टूडेंट मूवमेंट में स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का रोल बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है। ऑर्गेनाइजेशन किसी भी संगठन का, केवल स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का नहीं है, आप किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में काम करते हुए समय पर आपका संगठन का फिलॉसफी क्या है और आपका वर्किंग स्टाइल क्या है, आपका अप्रोच क्या है, ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट विषय होता है। सो इसलिए सेम उसी उस्मानिया यूनिवर्सिटी में हमारा पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री पीवी नरसिम्हा राव जी का वंदे मातरम मूवमेंट को लीड किया था। वंदे मातरम मूवमेंट का भी एक अड्डा था उस्मानिया यूनिवर्सिटी। सो इसलिए वो एजिटेशनल मूवमेंट से लेकर कंस्ट्रक्टिव अप्रोच तक, सोशल इंक्लूजन प्रोग्राम्स तक, सोशल डेवलपमेंट कंसर्न तक जो विद्यार्थी का जो रुचि रहता है, वो रुचि को गाइड करने के लिए एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का जो फिलॉसफी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करता है। उदाहरण के लिए हम देख सकते हैं कंस्ट्रक्टिव स्टूडेंट मूवमेंट्स पूरा भारत में स्वातंत्रोत्तर के बाद हमारा देश में हम क्लियरली देख सकते हैं। नॉर्थ ईस्ट स्टेट्स के बारे में अगर हम देखें तो नॉर्थ ईस्ट स्टेट्स में जो लोग रहते हैं वो लोगों को भारत के ऊपर एक ओपिनियन 1965 से पहले अगर हम ऑब्जर्व करें तो कोई आदमी नॉर्थ ईस्ट में रहने वाला अगर कुछ मुंबई आना है, नहीं तो कुछ हैदराबाद आना है, तो वो लोग मैं इंडिया जाके आना है, ऐसा एक शब्दों को हम लोग सुने थे। तो वो अभी स्थिति एकदम बदल गया। अभी स्थिति लगभग 1965 में स्टूडेंट्स एक्सपीरियंस इन इंटरस्टेट लिविंग, यूनिक एक्सपेरिमेंट टुवर्ड्स नेशनल इंटीग्रिटी, इसके लिए एक जो प्रोजेक्ट 1965 में शुरू हुआ, उस प्रोजेक्ट के कारण से हजारों विद्यार्थियों का नॉर्थ ईस्ट एरिया से, स्पेशली ट्राइबल स्टूडेंट्स एंड अदर जो नॉर्थ ईस्ट में डिफरेंट ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स है, उसको लेकर सभी स्टूडेंट्स को एवरी ईयर एक प्रोजेक्ट के नाते रूप में पूरा भारत में प्रवास उनका होना है। मिनिमम 40 डेज 50 डेज तक प्रवास होना है। हजारों फैमिलीज इसमें कनेक्टेड हुआ। उसका असर हम अभी क्लियरली देख रहे हैं नॉर्थ ईस्ट में कितना चेंज आया। अभी नॉर्थ ईस्ट स्टेट्स में अभी जो चेंज देख रहे हैं, इसका स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का एंड छात्रों का बहुत योगदान इसमें क्लियरली हम देख सकते हैं। ऐसे ही कश्मीर आंदोलन का भी, अभी कश्मीर 1990 में स्टूडेंट मूवमेंट जो कश्मीर आंदोलन का हुआ, जनरली हम ये भी कॉमन पीपल ऐसा सोच सकता है, जो विद्यार्थी कॉलेज में पढ़ता है उनका पढ़ाई के ऊपर ध्यान देना है, उनको उनका स्टूडेंट इश्यूज रिलेटेड कुछ एजिटेशन करना है तो ठीक है, लेकिन जो तमिलनाडु में रहते हैं, जो कर्नाटक में, केरल में रहते हैं, उनको कश्मीर के बारे में क्यों सोचना, ऐसा भी मुद्दा बनाने वाले भी हम देख सकते हैं कैंपसेस में। लेकिन 1990 में जो कश्मीर में चलो कश्मीर आंदोलन से जो पूरा देश भर जागृत किया गया, अवेयरनेस जनरेट किया गया, पूरा देश है क्या बोल के, सेव कश्मीर टुडे सेव इंडिया टुमारो बोल के जो नारा हमने दिया था वो टाइम पे छात्र आंदोलन में, वो टाइम से लेकर अभी तक हम 370 आर्टिकल अभी हम देख रहे हैं। 370 अभी कश्मीर में जो स्थितियां है, 370 आर्टिकल हटाने के बाद भी अभी पूरा देश भर इतना एक्सेप्टेंस इसलिए आया है। अभी जो परिस्थितियों को हम ऑब्जर्व कर रहे हैं, इसके पीछे भी विद्यार्थियों का, छात्र आंदोलन का इंपॉर्टेंट भूमिका है। ऐसे ही हम कश्मीर आंदोलन, सील प्रोजेक्ट, इससे पहले स्वदेशी मूवमेंट, आफ्टर इंडिपेंडेंस भी स्वदेशी मूवमेंट को विद्यार्थी संगठन बहुत इसमें योगदान है। विद्यार्थी संगठनों का, स्वदेशी मल्टीनेशनल कंपनीज का, भारत को समृद्ध भारत बनाना, भारत को आर्थिक रूप से बलवान बनाने के लिए जो एक्टिविटी है, जो लक्ष्य है, इसको प्राप्त करने में स्टूडेंट्स जो अवेयरनेस जनरेट किया स्वदेशी के बारे में, ये भी एक इंपॉर्टेंट योगदान है। इसमें स्टूडेंट्स फॉर डेवलपमेंट एंड स्टूडेंट्स फॉर सोशल चेंज, एक लास्ट 15-20 साल से हम ऑब्जर्व कर सकते हैं। कुछ विद्यार्थी संगठन विविध आयामों के रूप में, वेयर द स्टूडेंट इज, स्टूडेंट का हर एक विद्यार्थी का रुचि अलग होता है। कुछ विद्यार्थियों को डिफरेंट सोशल इश्यूज के ऊपर काम करना उनका आदत होता है, उनका जो इंटरेस्ट एरिया होता है। सो स्टूडेंट का जो रुचि है, इसके आधार पर विद्यार्थी को एक मार्गदर्शन देना, स्टूडेंट को एक गाइडेंस देना। इससे पहले एक पैनलिस्ट ने मेंशन किया, जो उनको गाइड कर रहा है वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है। विद्यार्थी शक्ति एक गंगा प्रवाह जैसा है, इसको एक राइट डायरेक्शन दिए तो राइट डायरेक्शन में पूरा हम सस्य शामिल कर सकते हैं देश को। अगर यही रॉन्ग डायरेक्शन में गए तो पूरा इसका परिणाम भी हम विकृत रूप से हम देख सकते हैं। सो इसलिए एक डेवलपमेंट एंगल में स्टूडेंट को अगर हम देखना है तो कंस्ट्रक्टिव अप्रोच में स्टूडेंट का विद्यार्थी मूवमेंट, स्टूडेंट सोशल मूवमेंट को देखना है तो हम डिफरेंट प्लेटफॉर्म से अभी प्रोमिनेंट इंस्टीट्यूशंस में एक वॉलंटियरली भी कुछ स्टूडेंट्स काम कर रहा है। मैंने हैदराबाद में रिसेंटली एक इंस्टीट्यूशन में विजिट किया था। वहां स्टूडेंट्स निर्माण एक ऐसा एक एनजीओ रजिस्टर किया और निर्माण एनजीओ के नाम पे एवरी ईयर 4 इयर्स कोर्स है वहां इंजीनियरिंग का। 4 ईयर कोर्सेस में सेकंड ईयर थर्ड ईयर तक स्टूडेंट्स सोशल वर्क काम करेगा, सोसाइटी से रिलेटेड कंसर्न जो गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स में जाना, डेवलपमेंट एक्टिविटीज में भाग लेना, ऐसा काम करेगा। और फोर्थ ईयर में सीरियसली एकेडमिक्स पे काम करेगा, उनका एकेडमिक्स को लेकर वो लोग काम करेगा। सो ऐसा एक डेवलपमेंट अप्रोच में स्टूडेंट्स का बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट भूमिका है। सो इसमें इंपॉर्टेंट विषय ये है, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जो प्रोग्राम्स प्लान करते हैं, इसमें ऑर्गेनाइजेशन फिलॉसफी, मैं रिपीटेडली इसलिए बोल रहा हूँ, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन फिलॉसफी, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जो गाइड करेगा, इसका इंपॉर्टेंट रोल स्टूडेंट को गाइड करने में होते हैं। और इसके साथ साथ प्रीवियस डिस्कशन में एक दो मुद्दा डिस्कशन में आया, ग्लोबल वाइड स्टूडेंट्स एक है, वी आर ऑल वन, ऐसा एक स्लोगन अभी तक स्टूडेंट के बीच में अभी तक नहीं आया, इसका भी एक चर्चा आया है। इसमें मैं एक दो इंपॉर्टेंट विषय रखना चाहता हूं। एवरी कंट्री हैज इट्स ओन आइडेंटिटी, एवरी नेशन हैज इट्स ओन आइडेंटिटी एंड इट्स ओन कल्चर। उनका कल्चर से उस देश को हम अलग करके नहीं देख सकते हैं। और अभी तक जो लेबर यूनियंस के बारे में जो नारा हमने सुना है, वो भी एक स्लोगन है, प्रैक्टिकली ये भी हमने नहीं देख पाए। पूरा वर्ल्ड वाइड लेबर ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का जो स्लोगन है, और मैं ये प्रपोज करता हूं, वाई ओनली स्टूडेंट्स ग्लोब वाइड एक होना है, पूरा दुनिया भर स्टूडेंट ग्लोब वाइड, जो स्टूडेंट को सेपरेट एक वर्ग के रूप में क्यों देखना है? सभी ह्यूमन बीइंग्स आर वन, ह्यूमन वननेस, इसको हम वसुधैव कुटुंबकम हमारा जो कॉन्सेप्ट है, सो इसको हम एक आइडियल कॉन्सेप्ट ऐसा समझ सकते हैं। स्टूडेंट्स नॉट ओनली फॉर स्टूडेंट्स, स्टूडेंट्स आल्सो फॉर अदर्स, स्टूडेंट्स कैन आल्सो वर्क फॉर द सोसाइटी, स्टूडेंट्स नॉट ओनली एजिटेट फॉर देयर ओन डिमांड्स, इट इज प्रूव्ड। हम इसको बहुत एग्जांपल्स हमने अभी तक जो डिस्कस किया, पैनलिस्ट ने हमारा सामने रखा, इसमें स्टूडेंट केवल स्टूडेंट ही कर सकता है, ये भी हम बोल सकते हैं। ऐसे एक स्टूडेंट का जो एज ग्रुप है, उस एज ग्रुप में उनका निस्वार्थ भाव रहता है और सैक्रिफाइंग नेचर रहता है। इवन उनका जो किसी विषय के ऊपर, किसी मुद्दा के ऊपर काम करने में उनका जीवन बलिदान करने का भी एक लेवल तक कमिटमेंट स्टूडेंट एज ग्रुप में रहता है। इसलिए विद्यार्थी अगर सोशल चेंज के लिए कुछ काम करना है, तो डेवलपमेंट सेक्टर में कुछ काम करना है, तो कंस्ट्रक्टिव वे में काम करना है, तो वो जिस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में काम करते हैं, जिस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को चूज करता है, वो उसके ऊपर ज्यादा प्रभाव दिखाई दे सकता है।
थैंक यू बालराजू, अच्छा मुद्दा आपने उठाया। अहमद शेख is one of the panelists, but because of some technical hiccups, he could not connect himself to this discussion. He may join in between, and we may offer him opportunity to put forward his views in the next course of discussion. Prafulla ji, I just would like to come towards you. Once upon a time, as Balraju said, that there was a slogan, and even that communist ideology gives its slogan that Vishwa ke Kamgar ek hai, that laborers across the globe are united. So Chhatra, Vishwa ke sabhi Chhatra ek hai, would it be a reality in future, और इसकी कुछ मर्यादा है, ऐसे कुछ प्रयास हो रहे हैं? आपको क्या लगता है कि विद्यार्थी संगठन को, विद्यार्थी आंदोलन को, छात्र आंदोलन को एक स्वाभाविक मर्यादा है अपने अपने परिसीमा की, अपने अपने राष्ट्र की, और ग्लोबल स्टेज पे कैन वी सी दैट एंटायर student community across the globe may come together and raise their voice against some issues or anything?
To answer this, I will just narrate an anecdote. In a outside class, there was one platform on which one of my, one of the faculty members from JNU was talking on globalization then in 1990s. And I asked him a question. He was a known Marxist. And I asked him a question. Sir, I think Marx was the first proponent of globalization. I have a question for you. Do you have a problem with globalization as an economic activity per se, or you have a problem with dollar globalization? What if the Cold War would have ended other ways, and instead of dollar globalization, this would have been a ruble globalization? Would you have had the same position on the issue of globalization? And he was completely baffled. In fact, because of that, I had to face a lot of issues in the JNU academic circles also. But the essential problem with the so-called communist understanding of this workers of the world unite or the students of the world unite is they forget the fact that the situation in each country as far as education, social structures, even the national and economic issues, of course, like for example the issue of climate change, there can be some kind of a global concern and global consensus, even for that matter the technological changes and the economic scenario. But we need to understand 2-3 important points. As it has come out from various discussions that the introduction of English education, evolution of the university system, it has some kind of bearing on the student movement also. So there is a tendency of blind imitation. This wokeism has also come from the blind imitation of the Berkeleys and the Columbias and those kind of universities. Then secondly, uh, the uh, why only this tendency of looking towards West for everything? Two most sustained and successful student movements are actually in Asia. And I'm not counting state-driven or communist party-driven movements like Tiananmen Square, but what happened in South Korea, for example, in 1988, where the indirect election was replaced with the direct election, or what has been happening in a country like Myanmar, for example, consistently, bringing democracy in Myanmar, student movement played a very critical role, and many a times we miss out in our context while understanding this. But lastly, what I would like to point out is why it has failed, and the answer lies in the failure of understanding of these cultural specificities of every society, every nation. Marx and Marxism ideologically accepted defeat immediately after the collapse of Soviet Union, when they said that this labor politics is not going to work. We have to work in the realm of culture now. A person like Romila Thapar has to come out and speak on nationalism in the post JNU incident, and give a lecture on what is true nationalism and what is not. That itself shows, or the Kanhaiya Kumar event was to be called as the cultural evening, and the cultural realm becoming important area of functioning for all the so-called this radical student movements, though they like to call themselves as democratic, they are most undemocratic and most intolerant in their nature. And
if I
therefore,
can intervene, even the Chinese Revolution, the Mao Zedong's revolution used to be addressed as the cultural revolution in Indian history textbooks.
absolutely. And therefore, what we see presently in either in the form of wokeism, what I like to call as the Instagram generation, which is very instant in their their responses without understanding the and I also mentioned what Devendra underscored the fact that the losing the essence. And where did it start in India? I would say the IIPM experiment by Arindam Chaudhary, the privatization, and the way private universities are curbing the student activism, even the prominent colleges like Stephens, the primary undertaking that you have to give is I will not associate myself with any kind of student politics or student activism. And in private universities and growing privatization, the phenomena is much larger. In fact, this should have been a greater cause for the students of the world unite. But communism and the communist ideological movements completely failed in this. That clearly shows their understanding of capital, their understanding of technology, and their understanding of this nation-specific issues is so abysmal, because they try to see everything in the binaries of haves and have-nots, and because of this broad ideological framework provided by Marx, they are not ready to go beyond it, and that is primarily the reason I believe that this is not possible. That there may be consensus on certain issues like capital investment in education sector, or the excess use of technology in human life, or environmental concerns, but they will be overarching. They will not be just pinning down to the student activism.
Thank you, Prafulla ji. Bhushan, Balraju, that let us move towards challenges being faced by now the student movement, because we are coming to almost the last 10 minutes of our panel discussion. And then I think that logically we have to move towards that. What are the new era challenges being faced by the student movement by and large? Devendra has given some narration about that, but we need to go in a bit detail that what we are expecting, that which kind of shape it will take in next couple of decades. Dr. Bhushan, would you throw some light, followed by Devendra and Dr. Balraju?
Yeah, Jayant. First of all, I think that the students should know about the ethos of every country. The slogan of students of the world unite and all will take place. It will be a reality only if they understand the ethos of their country. Every country has its own ethos, and every country has to work on the same platform which is provided by the country's ethos. So if certain student organization make this slogan just as a vehicle of their own agenda to carry forward their agenda and to carry forward their ideology, then it is not going to happen. If students are to be used as market entity, then students are not the fools where they will just carry forward with this ideology. Today's students should know basically what is the ethos of their country, what are the firm beliefs of their country. That is why on this background, then they can decide every policy of the nation, whether it is educational policy or policy related to culture or policy related to any aspect of and that is the biggest challenge, that the student has to undergo training through the regular curriculum, through regular study material. And what I think is, it is devoid in the curriculum of our present educational system. So this has to be brought out to the students, that the educational system should highlight the Indian ethos, and from that only we will be able to find out the challenges before our country. Jain.
Devendra?
I think the present challenges which we have when it comes to students and the student movements, as Prafulji mentioned, one of the limitations when it comes to the system, that we have more and more private universities and colleges coming up, which actually put a halt on the growth of student activism or movements within their campuses. I think one of the major problems which we as a society are facing is individualization, or we are having students who are very self-centered. They don't think beyond their individual self. So how will that person think about the society or the nation at large? Second, the education system which we as individuals are part of is more focused and oriented towards getting a certificate, making money, and building a career. Other important aspects of our life are ignored. I think third issue is something which we also discussed, that we need to develop an ability of critical thinking and reasoning among the youngsters, to make them realize that if somebody is saying something, please don't accept it at face value. Do your own critical analysis, do your own reasoning abilities. And eventually, I think, the new education policy is coming up. Somehow we have to think of incorporating all these three things as a part of the new curriculum.
Dr. Balraju?
The challenges before student movements and student organizations, अगर हम ऑब्जर्व करें तो मुझे लगता है स्टूडेंट्स का जो इंटरेस्ट एरिया चेंज हो रहा है, स्टूडेंट्स का जो रुचि बदल रहा है. आज हम आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस का जमाना में हम अभी इससे पहले भी जो डिस्कशन हुआ ग्लोबल वाइड स्टूडेंट इकट्ठा होना, एकत्रित होना, इसमें भी ऑलरेडी स्टूडेंट इन दिस वर्चुअल वर्ल्ड में ग्लोबली कनेक्टेड है. सेम बाकी पैनलिस्ट जो मुद्दा उठाया, जो एवरी कंट्री हैज इट्स ओन कल्चर, सो दैट इज वेरी मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है. और स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का इंपॉर्टेंट चैलेंज, इंपॉर्टेंट चुनौती ये हो सकता है, स्टूडेंट का जो बदलते हुए इंटरेस्ट को ध्यान में रखते हुए स्टूडेंट को कैसे रीच करना है. अभी हम देख सकते हैं कितने स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस पूरा स्टूडेंट पॉपुलेशन को कवर करने में सफल हुआ है. नंबर ऑफ इंस्टीट्यूशंस एंड रीचेबिलिटी ऑफ द स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन टू दैट इंस्टीट्यूशन इज वेरी बिग चैलेंज बिफोर स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. एनी स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वो कितने लोगों को रीच कर रहे हैं, इंपॉर्टेंट विषय होता है. सो स्टूडेंट का जो रुचि बदल रहा है, इसको ध्यान में रखते हुए स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का एक्टिविटीज भी प्लान करना बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है. 1998 के बाद एक जैन जी भी इसका साक्षी है. तेलंगाना, आंध्र प्रदेश एरिया में जो इंजीनियरिंग एजुकेशन का शुरुआत हुआ था, वो टाइम पे इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेजेस में जाके मेंबरशिप करना, इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज में जाके स्टूडेंट को ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कुछ कनेक्टिविटी में लाने के लिए एक इम्पॉसिबल विषय ऐसा स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को लगा. लेकिन इंजीनियरिंग स्टूडेंट्स कैरियर ओरिएंटेड एंड इंजीनियरिंग स्टूडेंट्स एंड इंडस्ट्री का एक इंटरेक्शन प्रोग्राम जैसा सृजना जैसा एक टेक्निकल फेयर्स ऑर्गेनाइज करने के बाद स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को जो रीचेबिलिटी का प्रॉब्लम था, वो अभी लगभग सभी इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज में स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस काम कर रहा है. सो सिमिलरली अभी एनईपी का भी, नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी का, हम इससे पहले 1968 में जो एजुकेशन पॉलिसी, उसके बाद 1986 रिवाइज्ड 1992 जो एजुकेशन पॉलिसीज हमने देखा, इससे सभी एजुकेशन पॉलिसी से भी जो एनईपी 2020 में मुझे लगता है स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का डिमांड्स एड्रेस हुआ है, स्टूडेंट मेंशन किया गया है. स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का जो इंडियन सेंट्रिक एजुकेशन सिस्टम एंड सोशल इंक्लूसिवनेस, ये सभी विषयों को एनईपी में इंक्लूड किया गया है. स्पेशल एजुकेशन जोन्स ऐसा जो प्रस्ताव आया है एनईपी में, ये सभी जो एनईपी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन का भी एक, मतलब मैं केवल चुनौतियां नहीं बता रहा, जो स्कोप है स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को आगे बढ़ने का, स्कोप भी बहुत ज्यादा स्कोप है. इस स्कोप में हम एनईपी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन से लेकर स्टूडेंट इंटरेस्ट एरियाज को ध्यान में रखते हुए प्रोग्राम्स प्लानिंग करें तो स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन स्टूडेंट्स को इजीली रीच कर सकता है और आगे बढ़ सकता है.
Thank you. We are in last 5 minutes of our discussion. I thank all the panel members that we have touched upon various important aspects of these student and youth movement. The originated during World War II with a very sharp nationalistic demand. And then that we have seen that in China, in Poland, in Hungary, in Czechoslovakia, all these Eastern European bloc, how the student movement dethrone the then undemocratic government. Similarly, same thing happened during emergency era in India also. The student movement we have seen started with a very small reason, with very contemporary issues, but ultimately we have seen across the globe it has taken a very stormy shape, and it has dethroned the regimes after regimes. We have seen the challenges before the student organization, student movement, youth movement. We have seen how even constructive activities are based upon these that student movement gave birth to these even many constructive activities and programs in India after emergency. Many projects are being led by these student activists. We have seen that how student activists entered into politics, and how the student movement and youth movement are nurturing the future leadership of the same country. We have seen the challenges, we have seen how we have to meet those challenges. With all those aspects, I think that with the given time constraint, we are now here almost 12:30. I thanks organizers that on behalf of all the panelists that you have given good opportunity for us to put forward our views, and it was a very holistic discussion. Thank you one and all.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jain Kulkarni, Dr. Bhushan Bhave, Dr. Balaraju, Mr. Ahmed Sheikh, Mr. Devendra Pai, and Mr. Prafulla Ketkar. It was a fantastic discussion. We are organizing this 2 days national conference on role and contribution of students and youth movements in nation building during pre and post-independence era. We are celebrating the 75th year of Indian independence, and this particular panel discussion was really fruitful to understand the student movements in the country and the journey of the student movement for the last 8 to 10 decades. After this discussion, we may find out the footsteps of the student movements in near future. Thank you very much, every one of you. I'm thankful to all the panelists on behalf of the Professor Balapte Center for Studies in Students and Youth Movements and the University of Mumbai. Thank you so much. And here we come to the end of the panel discussion. Thank you very much, all the panelists. You're so kind and so generous to all of us.
Thank you.
And we will move ahead in this activities of the second day of today's national conference on role and contribution of students in the youth movement in nation building and nation building during pre and post independence. We are going to the guest lecture on the role of NSS in nation building as a youth movement in a couple of minutes. Thank you for being with all of us.
Okay, I'm interested.
Namaskar. And we are moving ahead to the guest lecture on the role of NSS in nation building as a youth movement. And we have a special speaker on this particular subject, Dr. Kamal Kumar Kar, the Director, NSS Directorate, New Delhi. And we have guests with us today, the Regional Director of Maharashtra and Goa, NSS D. Karthikeyan, and the Youth Officer, Mr. Ajay Shinde. Kamal Kumar Kar ji, आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है. I take this opportunity to introduce the honorable guest. Dr. Kamal Kumar Kar is Assistant Program Advisor and Head of Directorate of NSS, Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, India. He has a master's degree from Utkal University in zoology with specialization in biochemistry with degree A+. And he has his PhD in the field of study of Gandhian thoughts. Mr. Kamal Kumar Kar is designated as Regional Director with NSS Regional Directorate of Gujarat, Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports and Government of India. The officer has numerous achievements on his name and has been very instrumental in shaping the state of national service scheme in Gujarat state. With his extravagant hard exertion, he presented these works as a role model for other states to replicate. Adding to his distinguished persona, Mr. Kar always depicts an eccentric affection against the young community, furthermore motivates them for development initiatives in the national interest. According to him, the youth of a nation makes for the base of any development mission and thereby integrating to the vision of the country. Through his guidance, he has impacted the community on a greater scale. In addition, has benefited thousands of youth across the nation. He periodically reviews the initiatives of the foundation with adding his valued inputs in the development of the organization's working. Since the beginning of Elixir Foundation's works towards social development, Mr. Kamal Kumar Kar's guidance has been of a great importance for the foundation. So here we have our guest, Dr. Kamal Kumar Kar. May I request on behalf of all of us, sir, please address us. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Dr. Kamal Kumar Kar, sir. Dr. Kamal Kumar Kar is here with us on the Zoom platform. We have some technical issues. He will start his address in a couple of minutes. Thank you for your patience. Kar, sir? सर आप म्यूट मोड पर हो सर.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible and your visuals are available with us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us.
I'm extremely sorry for this trouble because I was traveling from Secretariat to Directorate from where I was supposed to attend this one. So on en route I have joined because you know the commitment.
Yes, sir.
So once again, my sincere apology to the organizers for joining from the vehicle. Never mind. So welcome to all the participants, the dignitaries from University of Mumbai and all the participants who have joined online as well as offline for this national workshop on role of youth for national development in pre and post-independence era to mark this Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. This is really nice effort from the ministry, from the University of Mumbai. And I am very thankful to the organizers as well as specifically to Honorable Vice Chancellor and Registrar, my friend, Mr. Puranik, to ask me the though it is very busy schedule for me during the Republic Day parade and all this PM atom and all these things. Still then, because all of you are knowing NSS is always committed towards the national development. So I accepted the invitation, and this is a few minutes of technical glitch for which I apologize. And now I can start. I'll start my topic with you all. So far as the National Service Scheme is concerned, as all of you know, that this program is a flagship program of Ministry of Youth and Sports, Government of India. It is started since 1969, and I am not going to discuss about the nitty-gritty and all the basic things, how this happened, how it was started, and how NSS became operational at the national level. This is the history and philosophy of NSS, on which I don't want to speak much more and don't want to spare much time on this. So now the point is that NSS has become a youth movement in detail. During post-independence era, it was felt that the youth who are in the higher educational sector, they should do something productive for the society so that they should work and community should gain something from them. This is the real requirement based on which the National Service Scheme was set up. A salute to the then Prime Minister, then Education Minister, who have become instrumental, all Vice Chancellors of the universities across the country, who worked wholeheartedly to coin and formulate the scheme for the students in the higher educational setup. So now coming to how this became a youth movement, the main youth who started work in 37 universities, and now we are having the presence in more than 500 universities across the country. And more than 40 lakh volunteers are been working with NSS wholeheartedly. So this is the main thing, and this is the main commitment which shows the commitment of our youth towards the nation building process. Now, thinking of their well-being or their personal involvement, they didn't even care. So wholeheartedly they started working in the field, and they really to say I appreciate, being the organizational head, I appreciate the contribution of the youth who had done tremendous work during these 52 years. NSS, we have completed 52 years of our existence, and around 40 lakh of youth, they're regularly been working under the dynamic leadership of our people, our regional directors, our state NSS officers, then our ministries, our state government, the university functionaries. So all we are working wholeheartedly for the national development. And this became a movement. This program has become a movement for all. Now, if I'll say that the contribution of our volunteers, there is so much contribution that I cannot, even if I'll start counting, it is not possible.
Recording in progress. Yeah, sorry for the trouble, the technical issues. For that, I am very sorry for this again, because I was moving and then I am joining. Okay, now coming to back to the point. When we see the contribution of NSS volunteers for national development, the field in which they have worked, the area where they have worked, those are clearly predefined areas. Main objective of NSS volunteers was development of personality through community services. And recently, I am coming back to 6th August 2021. I am precising. 6th August 2021, there was a meeting which was taken by Honorable Prime Minister, in which it was been told that NSS objective, the motto of NSS, which we followed, that was not me but you. And in Hindi, we used to say, "Main nahi aap." So it was been suggested, rather it was been, and we have been encouraged by the input of Honorable Prime Minister, that it should be "Swayam se pehle aap." It should not be "not me but you, main nahi aap." It is "Swayam se pehle aap." That means the NSS volunteers, they should work mainly for the community, mainly for the other people who are in the society. That should be there. They should work for them. So this commitment and this involvement of our volunteers for the community development and to take up different activities, and especially when I am working from the directorate seeing the pan-India, if I am seeing the pan-India situation, the work the volunteers they have been doing, this is much more than a movement. If I can say, if I'll say that this is a youth movement, then I am downgrading the contribution of the youth. They are living their luxury, they are living their safety, they are living their comfort zone and coming to the society to work. For example, if you see the pandemic situations last year, and also today also the same situation is continuing. We are not that much coming out of the situation. So during the pandemic, around 2 lakh of our volunteers, 2 lakh is not a small number, 200,000 across the country, they came directly and they assisted the district administration, state administration for the work in the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, when maximum people were remaining indoor. These volunteers, they came out to work for the community members. They have their family, they have the equal stress, they have the equal risk of the life, but still then they have worked. Lot of our volunteers, they have in the initial period of during COVID phase 1, COVID-19 phase 1, there is scarcity of face masks. So our volunteers, they themselves prepared masks, and I am on record, I can say more than 3 crore masks are being prepared by these volunteers, and they have been distributed within the community members. So this shows that not only the movement, if it is only pre-independence era, the youth they have worked, but equally the post-independent era, NSS has emerged as the largest organized youth movement in the country. Starting from 40,000 to 40 lakh, I can say it is 100-fold increase in the number of the volunteers. Though the infrastructure, though the administration is as it was during 1969, though there is not much change in this factor, but there is a dramatically 100-fold increase in the number of youth who are inclined towards work for the community development and social development. So NSS, it is now not simply a scheme or not simply a program of Government of India or a program for the youth. It has become a movement. If I'll count in the cumulative numbers, if I'll say that more than 7 crore of youth have gone through the process of National Service Scheme volunteership. So in their life, when they are coming into the public life, some of them are administrators, some of them are teachers, some of them are lecturers, different professional, they are lawyers, they are politicians, they are social workers. So they are in every field, they are having their presence. So my point is that the NSS gave them a platform which made these people a real asset for the society. always we are saying, whenever there is a discussion, whenever there is a talk, it has been told that the youth are the future of the country. They should be given the chance. They should be given the opportunity to run. The future in their hand. But the practically to say, if I am not wrong, NSS is the only organization which really gives power to the youth, whether it is the organization of the camp, organization of the programs, planning of the programs. Everywhere our youth has been given due importance. And this is the only program where we have our NSS volunteers as representatives in the university level advisory committees, where the youth, they sit directly with Honorable Vice Chancellor, principals, registrar, finance officers, controllers. So they sit with them and discuss what are the programs which have been planned for the youth. So really it is a democratic as well as youth driven program. So the moment I can tell you, the moment which has been running since last 52 years, it has become a youth driven program. All the input are being given by the youth. So if I'll go on asking and deliberating the type of programs or the examples, let me give you 2-3 examples which are really, we can say, and we're proud of being the family of National Service Scheme volunteers as well as National Service Scheme functionaries. Coming to Maharashtra, especially because I have seen the work of University of Mumbai, state of Maharashtra. Recently, I have been discussing with Honorable Principal Secretary of Maharashtra Government Higher Technical Education Department. The work which has been done by NSS volunteers in a systematic way, that is called Ahwan, the preparedness for the disaster management. This is the most unique example where our volunteers have been trained to cope up with any natural disaster or any disaster which comes in their way in the society. And we are getting the results. During the severe heavy flood in Mumbai, during the building collapse, during the flood in the different districts in Maharashtra, there was heavy flood to last 2 years back. Last year also there was flood. So the work of our volunteers, it has gone many folds, it is increased to many folds because they have been trained. 4 or 5 days before, there was a train accident in Jalpaiguri, Mainaguri, Jalpaiguri sector in West Bengal. In the night, there was an accident of a train. So our volunteers who are there nearby, they came to the rescue and they started assisting the authorities to carry out the rescue operation. They started giving the food, they took out the people, they consolidated them, they consoled them, the psychological counseling, the immediately availability of the help, medicines, and first aid. So these are the things which our volunteers, they have been providing. So these are few examples. One is the disaster management, which I told during COVID-19, all our 720, all districts, we have designated our program officer as nodal officers. So I have got calls from our nodal officers during review. We have also discussed that they got overseas calls from Canada, calls from UK, call from US, call from Africa, call from US. So from abroad, they got the call in the midnight that our relatives are in your district jurisdiction. So we are held up here. We are unable to provide help. So how you can provide the help or whether you will be helpful. So our NSS functionaries, our nodal officer, they took the help of NSS volunteers and immediately traced the needy person and assisted them. So this shows the real commitment of our volunteers. This shows their commitment, their attachment and dedication to the community. And my friends, I am very proud to lead this organization. 40 lakh young and energetic youth, and every year they have been changing. 50% of our volunteers, they have been changed. We are having a constant flow of young blood. Coming to the blood, Honorable Prime Minister in 2021, in his address to our NSS volunteers, the tableau artists, the NCC cadets in his residence, he appreciated and praised these volunteers as they are one of the largest blood donor in the country. So during pandemic, Maharashtra has seen the effort of our NSS volunteers, specifically the University of Mumbai volunteers, running blood donation camp in the Mumbai suburban stations. So if I'll go on telling the contribution, the list is not going to end here. I'm not talking about these traditional programs which was started, this blood donation, this plantation, this pulse polio immunization, these are not the things which our volunteers are restricted. They have gone more than that. Entrepreneurship, skill development, creation of durable assets. Again, coming to the Maharashtra example, creation of libraries in the community, in the adopted villages. More than 300 libraries are being set up by our volunteers for the community people who can read, who can go through the records, who can prepare the youth who are not getting the facility of competitive exams literature, so they can prepare themselves. So these are the things. Coming to example of Kerala, where home for homeless activity is going on. NSS volunteers, they are preparing homes for their friends who don't have the home, their permanent home they don't have. So these volunteers, they prepare homes for the homeless. Mapping of the Gram Panchayat estates, the resource mapping of the Gram Panchayats by the NSS volunteers. Punarjani program, where they prepare, our technical volunteers, they repair the medical equipments, the beds, the fittings in the hospitals. So these are the list of activities which showing that our volunteers are really committed, and it has become a real youth-driven and youth-led movement in the post-independent era. And during the new education policy, if we are going as per the provisions, as per the provisions made in the new education policy, service component is going to be a mandatory one, and all youth who are in the educational, higher educational fold, they should go on working in a community development. Now there are more challenges coming in front of us. This, what I told, that this is a youth-led movement and youth-centric movement. Our program officer, our program coordinators, and being us, we are the guiding personnel. We are simply guiding these youth to do the work. But these, the youth, they are the real executors, they are the implementers, and they are the planners of these activities. So we should not neglect. And I am saluting each and every NSS volunteer across the country who are really contributing towards this development issue. So now coming to the issue which is in coming years, it may come. The growing, we are very proudly, we are saying that we are the youngest nation, the population, we are having largest number youth, but in coming 20-30 years, this will have a reverse trend. The number of youth, it will decrease. The migration from the rural area to the urban area, it will increase. There will be other issues. The demography issue will be there. The infrastructure, the load on the urban infrastructure will increase. Whereas at the rural infrastructure, they will be going towards the extinction, it may be. So the call of the time is to modernize ourselves, to revolutionize ourselves, and to replan and to rethink. And being the NSS volunteers, NSS being at the forefront, always we take the challenges. Always we have the new blood, new thought, and new thinking process, which is constantly going on amongst the NSS youth, our volunteers, as well as our functionaries. Now we have to think of to develop the urban structure, not rural, not urban, but a urban structure. We have to work on that. We have to work on the new emerging fields. Let us say edtechs, educational technologies are there. Now, during COVID pandemic, it has given us opportunities as well as challenges. So this hybrid mode, the online and offline mode of education, it has come up. Now we have to work, the educational planners, educational administrators, we have to work on creation of open resources, which will be available to the youth who are at the remote corner. The main principle on which we have started working, that is Gandhian thought, that the benefits should reach at the last mile. The person which is sitting at the last mile, he or she should get the benefit. Then only a balanced economy, a balanced nation, or a real democracy will be established. And in terms of Gandhiji, we say the Ram Rajya. It will be only possible when the benefit is going to the person which is sitting at the last mile. So we have to think in that manner, in that angle, and our volunteers and our functionaries, they are really working on that. And in coming days, the challenges will be more, and I am sure that the youth who have created a mass movement in the field, mass movement in the community to become one of the largest trained social worker or community development oriented NSS activists, I am sure in coming years they will not leave behind, they will not be remaining at the backstage to accept these challenges. Now the implementation of AI, artificial intelligence, entrepreneurship, the development of the skill, and the training in the vocational courses. So these are the things which will work in coming years, so that our volunteers will become more and more helpful to the community, to the society where they are staying, where they are living. So the youth-centric and youth-led movement started since 1969 is going towards maturity after 50 years. I cannot say that we are going to a old age or a vridhashram or banaprast or sannyas. It is evergreen. Whoever are the functionaries, whoever are the leaders leading these youth, and finally in one term I can say this karma yogi, I can say the NSS volunteers who are the real karma yogi, who are the real sannyasi, who are working for the community development. So I salute them all, and I hope, and not I am hoping, I am confident in coming years these volunteers will definitely justify their role, their contribution towards the society, and definitely will also come up the expectations of the government, of the community. This much I am thinking, and I am extremely sorry for the technical glitches which happened, and I hope in a short span of time I have tried to sum up the whole world of NSS in a nutshell. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity, and if any questions I can take in the chat box, or you can give any questions. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a passionate presentation by a person who completely dedicated his life, his every moment of his life to the NSS, and that is why it was very much important for all of us having you with us for the guest lecture on topic role of NSS in nation building as a youth movement. Sir, our own Registrar of Mumbai University, he himself is a director of NSS of the Mumbai University, and we have D. Karthikeyan, Regional Director Maharashtra and Goa for the NSS, and Mr. Ajay Shinde, the youth officer, they were present with us during your presentation. Sir, I myself was the NSS volunteer during my college days way back in 1984 to 89, and as a professor of my college I was the NSS program officer. It really is a proud moment for all of us to be the part and parcel of NSS, and everyone present over here understands the role of NSS volunteer in nation building. You rightly pointed out, sir, yes, our Mumbai University NSS volunteers and NSS volunteers throughout the state and the entire country played their role during this current pandemic, and that is why the country is getting back again into its steps. Thank you very much, sir, for being with all of us. It really was an very enthusiastic and a very promotive lecture from your side. स्वयं से पहले आप, ये जो हमारी NSS की tagline है, that is very much important. So we are going to follow स्वयं से पहले आप, और आप में हम लोग सबसे पहले देश को शामिल करते हैं. तो देश की सेवा करना यही हमारे प्रोफेसर बाल आपटे इनके जीवन का एक मकसद था, उनके जीवन का एक ध्येय था, और उसी उपलक्ष्य को ध्यान में रख के हमारे प्रोफेसर बाल आपटे सेंटर फॉर स्टडीज इन स्टूडेंट्स एंड यूथ मूवमेंट्स हमने ऑर्गेनाइज किया है ये 2 दिन का नेशनल परिषद role and contribution of students and youth movements in nation building during pre and post independence era. Sir, we are very much thankful to you on behalf of the Bal Apte Center and the University of Mumbai and the entire teaching fraternity present over here, and the NSS fraternity, which really feel that you are a role model to every one of us. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, sir. And here we come to the end of the guest lecture and the first half of the second day of this national conference. Dear students, the dear present, the participants, We have shared a link for your attendance. We have shared a form. Please fill up the Google form. And here we come to the end of the first session. We will begin exactly at 2 o'clock. And at 2 o'clock, we'll be starting with the paper presentation of the participants. And the paper presentation is scheduled at 2 p.m. and we have the valedictory function at 4 p.m. sharp on the same platform. The chief guest for the valedictory function is Professor Vidyut Chakraborty, the Vice Chancellor of Vishwa Bharati University, Shanti Niketan, West Bengal. We'll be meeting at 2 o'clock for the paper presentations at various platforms. The platforms are shared with all the participants. So let us meet exactly after 60 minutes. Thank you. And have a good time. Bye-bye.